Elias Ward never imagined that a simple mistake in navigation would drop his small exploration ship straight into the heart of the Valter Dominion, the most feared alien empire in the Spiral Rim. But that was exactly what happened on a day that should have been ordinary. He was captured before he could even send a distress call, surrounded by towering Valter soldiers with bodies like carved stone and burning red lines glowing across their armor. They dragged him through massive doors into the Hall of Crowns, a grand chamber filled with thousands of alien nobles who watched him with cold amusement, their strange voices echoing off the crystal walls. Instead of killing him, they decided to laugh at him, because humans were considered weak, soft creatures in their eyes, not worth anger or fear. The nobles joked loudly about letting the little mammal try sitting on the emperor's throne as entertainment, a casual test they expected to end with him screaming or being vaporized. The throne itself stood on a raised platform made of black stone veined with glowing gold, ancient energy running through it like a heartbeat. Legend said it was alive in some strange way, choosing rulers through power and rejecting any unworthy creature by burning them into dust. The emperor, a huge being whose body looked as if it were made of flames trapped in flesh, leaned forward and commanded Elias to sit, his voice deep and dangerous, filled with cruel amusement. Elias could feel the weight of thousands of alien eyes on him, waiting for him to fail, waiting for him to suffer. Even though his heart pounded hard enough to hurt, he stepped forward, muttering to himself that he would probably die sitting in a chair, which felt like the most embarrassing way to go. Every alien laughed at that, their voices sharp and cold. When Elias reached the platform, the air around the throne hummed, and he felt a warm pull as if the throne itself were calling out to him. He slowly lowered himself onto it, expecting pain, fire, or death. Instead, a violent burst of light exploded from the stone, wrapping around his arms, chest, and back like living chains. Symbols and lines of glowing gold crawled across his skin and sank into his bones. The floor shook so hard that nobles fell to their knees, terrified. A deep voice spoke inside every mind in the chamber, not from Elias, not from any creature, but from the throne itself, declaring that the chosen one had arrived. The words froze the entire room. The emperor took a step back in shock, the bright fires in his eyes shrinking as confusion and fury twisted across his face. No one could understand what they were seeing. A human, a creature they mocked, had been accepted by the most sacred object of their empire. Suddenly the fear in the room was thick enough to taste. Guards tried to rush forward and pull Elias off, but the throne reacted with violent energy, blasting them back with waves of golden fire. Spears melted. Armor cracked apart. Even the emperor could not step closer without being thrown by invisible force. Elias sat frozen, terrified, glowing with power he didn't understand. He had no idea what he had done. He had no idea why the throne had chosen him. All he knew was that every alien in that room now looked at him with horror instead of laughter. What had begun as a cruel joke had turned into something far more dangerous. In that moment, the entire empire shifted, and every Valter in the chamber understood the truth. Their throne had chosen a human. A mistake. A miracle. A disaster. And the war that would follow had already begun the second Elias took his seat. Elias did not understand why he was still alive after sitting on the emperor's throne, but he quickly learned that the throne itself was the only reason he had not been killed in the first few minutes. When the guards tried to pull him away, golden energy burst from the ancient stone and threw them across the hall as if they were made of paper. Their weapons melted in their hands, their armor cracked, and even the emperor had to step back when he felt the shockwave push against his burning skin. The entire chamber was filled with fear, not for Elias, but for what the throne had declared. Whispers spread among the nobles, their voices trembling, as they said that the throne was protecting him, that it had accepted him, that this strange human was now the chosen ruler of the Valter Dominion. Elias tried to explain that he had not meant to sit in the throne, that he did not want to be emperor of anything. But his words meant nothing because the throne spoke louder than he ever could. It responded to his voice, his heartbeat, even his thoughts, releasing soft pulses of energy whenever he panicked, almost as if it were comforting him or reminding everyone around that he was under its protection. The emperor, furious and humiliated, roared that the throne was malfunctioning, that it must be broken, but deep down he already knew the truth. The throne had never chosen wrongly in millions of years. It was ancient, older than their empire, older than their recorded history. If it had accepted a human, then something unimaginable was happening. Across the empire, every Valter dreadship, soldier, priest, and noble felt a signal ripple through their minds, a psychic message sent from the throne itself. A new emperor had been chosen. Millions of warriors dropped to one knee, confused and terrified. Millions more, especially the rebels who had been waiting for a sign of weakness, saw an opportunity. While loyal soldiers prepared to defend the new throne chosen, the fallen factions that had hated the old emperor and the Dominion alike sharpened their weapons and prepared to strike. Elias felt all of it through the strange bond that had formed between him and the throne. His head pounded with visions of war fleets gathering, ancient beasts stirring, enemy factions whispering about the soft human that now sat on the most powerful seat in the galaxy. It felt like a storm building in his mind, growing louder every second. He could not stand because the throne held him gently but firmly, and he could not run because there was nowhere to go. He realized he had started an interstellar civil war without meaning to, simply by sitting in a chair he had never wanted. And when the nobles approached him carefully, asking for orders, calling him my emperor, Elias wanted to scream. He tried again to tell them he did not want the role, that he could not lead an alien empire, that he barely managed to run his small exploration ship. But the throne's golden energy pulsed through the air and repeated with absolute certainty that he commanded. The ancient seat rejected the old emperor the moment he tried to come closer, casting him out of the chamber with a force that shook the castle walls. In that single moment, the old ruler became a threat, a rival, and Elias could feel his hatred rising like a storm. The emperor would not accept this insult. He would gather loyalists, unleash forbidden weapons, and burn the galaxy if that was what it took to reclaim the throne. Elias felt the weight of an entire empire pressing on his shoulders, and for the first time in his life, he understood what real danger was. He was not simply trapped. He was the spark that had just ignited a massive war. Elias spent the next few days trapped physically and mentally on the Valter flagship, a massive war vessel called the Vengeance Star, where every corridor echoed with whispers about the strange human now tied to the throne. Valter warriors watched him with fear and confusion, unsure if they should bow to him or stay as far away as possible, because the memory of the throne throwing the old emperor across the hall was still fresh in their minds. Elias himself felt exhausted as the throne's bond continued to pulse inside him, sending him visions and feelings he did not understand. Through this strange connection, he sensed movement across the galaxy like a distant storm rolling nearer. Powerful enemy factions were reacting to the news of a new throne chosen. The Draxiae Horde, a brutal species with bone-white armor grown from their own bodies, were gathering giant living ships that roared like wild beasts as they flew. The Free Suns Alliance, made of smaller species who had suffered under Valter rule, saw this moment as their only chance to break the Dominion once and for all. In the shadows, the old emperor himself was recruiting loyalists, bitter soldiers, and secret priests who believed he was the only rightful ruler. Elias felt their anger, their desire for revenge, and their hunger for war pounding at the edges of his mind like drums. One night, Standing on the bridge of the Vengeance Star, Elias stared at a giant hologram of the galaxy and watched red enemy markers appear one after another, spreading like fire on dry grass. The Valter officer beside him, a tall figure with armor covered in glowing veins, spoke carefully, as though afraid of offending him or offending the throne. She told Elias that rebels planned to attack the capital within 3 days. Elias felt his stomach twist because he knew he was not ready to lead a galaxy-sized empire, and he did not want to be part of any war. But he realized something even worse. If he did nothing, millions would die because of him. He needed allies, he needed help, and he needed someone who actually understood him, not as an emperor, but as a human. So for the first time since being captured, he made a decision that was his own. He asked the Valter officer to open a long-distance channel to Earth. She froze, shocked that he wanted to involve his homeworld, but Elias insisted, saying that if he had dragged humanity into danger, then humanity deserved a voice in what came next. When the transmission finally reached Earth, the humans reacted with disbelief, then alarm, and finally determination. Within hours, the United Nations Starshield fleet prepared for launch. Their ships were small compared to the giant Valter dreadnoughts, but they were fast, clever, and built by people who had survived countless hardships. When they arrived, Elias felt a warmth in his chest that almost made him cry. He was no longer alone in a sea of alien giants. The human admiral, Rana Cho, stood tall on her bridge, stared at the chaotic situation, and said calmly that humanity never backed down from impossible odds. In that moment, even the Valter officers seemed surprised, as if they had expected humans to hide or surrender. Instead, they watched Elias stand straighter, feeling strength he had forgotten he had. Together, with the humans bringing strategy and the Valter bringing raw power, a new plan began to take shape. Elias finally understood something important. He was no longer just a lost explorer. The throne had chosen him, but now he had chosen to fight, not to rule, but to save countless lives from a war that was forming because of him. The allied fleet of humans and Valtor jumped into the Cradle Nebula with a silent flash of light, arriving in a place that looked both beautiful and deadly, where swirling clouds of blue and gold drifted like slow-moving storms and lightning cracked silently across the darkness. Elias stood on the bridge of the Vengeance Star with his hands shaking slightly, watching the nebula spread across the screens like a living painting. But he had no time to admire it because enemy ships were already hiding inside the glowing clouds, waiting for their moment to strike. The Draxiae horde came first, riding massive living war beasts shaped like enormous armored insects, their spines glowing with venom-ready energy. Right behind them, cruisers from the Free Suns Alliance appeared, sleek and sharp, firing long streams of plasma that lit the nebula like fireworks. And finally, the traitorous Valter loyal to the old emperor arrived in black-armored dreadnoughts, their ships shaped like jagged thrones of metal. They all came for one reason: to kill the new throne chosen and shatter the Dominion forever. Elias felt his heart pound as alarms filled the air. Admiral Rana Cho's calm voice cracked through the noise, telling him that the moment had come, the moment where he had to act or everything would fall apart. Elias swallowed hard, then nodded and stepped closer to the throne bond interface on the ship. When the battle started, it was like the sky itself exploded. Human ships, small and quick, shot forward like silver arrows, weaving under enemy fire with impossible speed. The Valter dreadships followed, blasting beams of molten gold that tore enemy hulls into broken pieces. Explosions lit the nebula clouds in waves of color, turning the darkness into a constant sunrise of fire and debris. Elias felt the throne's power rising inside him, guiding his thoughts and sharpening his instincts. When he shouted an order, it carried strength he didn't know his voice could hold. spreading through the entire Allied fleet like a fire that refused to die. He told the ships to move in ways the Valtor had never thought of before. Using tricks humans had learned from centuries of fighting smarter enemies, fake retreats, fast dives into ion storms, risky attacks that required perfect timing. Human pilots pretended to be damaged so they could drift close to enemy cruisers before striking at their weak spots. Valtor commanders rammed into the sides of the giant Drac-ZA beasts, cracking their armor with brutal force. Elias even convinced one damaged dreadship captain to deliberately charge at a Drac-ZA flagship, using the dying ship as a weapon to break its armor open. When the captain asked if this was human bravery, Elias said it was simply human stubbornness, which made the captain laugh before sending his burning ship into the enemy like a meteor. The battle raged on for hours, with no side giving up, until finally the nebula was filled with drifting wreckage and fading light. The rebels began to fall back, shocked that the humans and Valtor were fighting together with such strange unity. Elias stood trembling, exhausted but alive, watching the enemy fleets retreat into the nebula clouds. He could barely believe it, they had won the first major fight. But he knew, deep in his bones, that this was only the beginning. The old emperor was still out there, gathering strength, waiting for his chance to strike at the heart of the Dominion. And Elias understood that the next battle would not be in open space. It would be at the capital, where the throne had first accepted him, and where the final fight for the fate of a galaxy would soon take place. The final battle arrived sooner than anyone expected, because the old emperor, burning with rage and desperation, gathered a massive fleet larger and darker than anything the galaxy had seen in centuries, and he aimed it straight at the Valtor capital, the same world where Elias had first sat on the throne and accidentally changed the fate of millions. When Elias and the Allied fleet arrived in orbit, the capital planet burned beneath them, its once bright cities swallowed by fire and collapsing metal, its shields flickering like dying stars as civilians rushed into underground shelters. The old emperor's flagship, the Obsidian Crown, hovered above the planet like a shadow made of hatred, its armor blacker than space, its lights glowing with sick red flames. His voice suddenly appeared on every screen, speaking with a deep echo that felt like claws scratching the inside of the mind, accusing Elias of stealing what belonged to him and declaring that he would break the throne bond and rip Elias's mind apart. Elias stood tall, even though his hands trembled, and told the emperor that he didn't steal anything, that he had simply sat where they had told him to sit. But the old emperor thought this was an insult and roared with fury. Before Elias could say anything more, the Obsidian Crown fired a powerful eclipse beam that tore through nearby cruisers and shattered part of the capital's surface. The battle began instantly. Human and Valtor ships formed a wide shield wall around the capital, while fighter wings darted into enemy fire. Human vessels moved with incredible speed, dodging blasts from enemy dreadnoughts, while Valtor warships absorbed hits with thick armor before firing molten beams back. The sky became a storm of explosions, smoke, and falling debris, lighting up the darkness in flashes of white and gold. Elias stood in the center of the bridge, feeling the throne's power rising in him like a second heartbeat. The more danger they faced, the stronger the energy grew, wrapping around his thoughts and sharpening every decision. When he ordered the fleet to shift formation, the throne seemed to project his command directly into every mind that served him, making their reactions faster and more united than ever before. Still, the old emperor's forces were overwhelming. His ships moved with terrifying precision, and the Obsidian Crown alone was strong enough to crush entire fleets. Admiral Rana Cho ordered her ships to tighten their line and told Elias that they could not win unless he did something that only the throne-chosen could do. Elias knew what she meant, and even though he was terrified, he felt a strange calm settle over him. He stepped away from the command panels and walked into the center of the bridge, closed his eyes, and let the throne's power flow through him without holding back. A wave of golden light burst from his body, spreading like fire across the battlefield. Every soldier, human and alien, felt his presence inside their minds, steady and warm, cutting through the fear. The old emperor screamed in anger and launched a psychic attack through the throne bond, trying to crush Elias from the inside. The two minds collided like stars slamming into each other. Elias saw visions of the old emperor's long rule victories, cruelty, and endless hunger for power. The emperor saw memories of Earth humans fighting, laughing, helping each other, refusing to break even in their darkest moments. The emperor staggered, confused and shaken by this strange strength. Elias pushed harder, fueled by every memory of humanity's resilience, and struck with all the power the throne had given him. The old emperor's mind shattered like glass. The obsidian crown erupted in a giant burst of dark fire, lighting the sky like a collapsing sun. The rebel fleet, realizing their leader had fallen, broke apart and fled. Elias collapsed to his knees, glowing softly as the last energy faded from his body. The battle was over, and he had won not with cruelty, but with the strength of what it meant to be human. Elias woke up in the Hall of Crowns again, lying on cool stone, his body feeling strange and light, as if the throne's power had drained out of him and left only a soft echo behind. When he opened his eyes, he found the chamber filled with Valter nobles kneeling in a wide circle around him, their faces lowered, their glowing markings dimmed in a show of respect he had never seen before. Human officers stood nearby as well, their uniforms torn from battle, their eyes tired but proud as they watched him rise. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air felt heavy and sacred, as if everyone in the room understood that they were standing at the end of something enormous and the beginning of something they had never imagined. As Elias pushed himself to his feet, the throne behind him glowed softly, the same calm golden light that had wrapped around him during the war. And then a voice gentle but powerful filled the hall, declaring that the war had ended and that the chosen one now reigned. The nobles bowed even lower, expecting him to sit, to command, to take full control of the largest empire in the spiral. But Elias shook his head slowly and stepped away from the throne, leaving a faint shimmering trail of gold behind him. He told them he would not rule an empire, that he had no desire to sit on a throne or wear a crown, that leading through fear and control was not the way his people lived. Gasps filled the room. Some nobles looked terrified, others confused, but the throne pulsed with warm light as if it understood him better than anyone else. Elias spoke clearly, his voice steady even though his heart felt heavy. He said he would help them build something better, a council where worlds had a voice, a system where power was shared instead of forced, a place where humans, Valter, and every other species could stand side by side without chains or fear. At first, the nobles hesitated because their history was full of emperors who wanted only domination, never cooperation. But the throne pulsed again, gently urging them to accept, and slowly, one by one, they lifted their heads and nodded. Outside the tall crystal windows, the first sunrise after the war painted the sky with gold and violet streaks that shimmered over the wounded city. Ships from Earth and Valter cruisers flew in peaceful formation, guiding rescue teams and carrying supplies to the burned streets below. For the first time in the Dominion's history, humans walked through the capital without being mocked, feared, or threatened. They were helpers, allies, equals. Elias stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city, breathing in the cold, fresh air, feeling the weight of everything he had survived. He looked at the throne behind him one last time, glowing with quiet acceptance, and understood that while it had chosen him with ancient power, he had chosen his own path with human will. That choice mattered more. Admiral Ranacho joined him at his side, telling him that Earth would support the new council and that humanity was proud of what he had done. Elias smiled tiredly, saying that he had simply sat on a chair and the universe had overreacted. She laughed softly, telling him that no one in human history had ever done something so small that turned into something so huge. As the morning light grew brighter, Elias whispered to himself that it was strange how everything had started as a cruel joke, played by aliens who wanted to laugh at a human. Yet the throne had taken him seriously, more seriously than he ever took himself. And because of that, an empire had changed, a war had ended, and a new future had begun, built not on fear, but on the human belief that even the most broken things can be rebuilt if people are willing to try.